Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Kyle Moore, founder of Quarry Hill Advisors in St. Paul, Minnesota, on the show today. Kyle started his career as a professional golfer and traveled the country for 4 years with his now wife as his caddy before deciding to settle down and find a job. A mentor introduced him to the world of financial planning, and he found a fee-only firm in St. Paul to start his career. The firm was owned by two partners that split after 9 months, and he followed one of the partners to start a new firm despite them having limited revenue. So he took a $24,000 a year salary until they could afford to pay him more. He was there for 4 years and faced a decision: sign an employment agreement and take over as lead advisor of $100 million of client assets, or go start his own firm. While many would certainly take the big salary, he decided it was a great time to go ahead and start his own firm. And I have to say, it looks like it was the right decision. He started his firm with about $30,000 in revenue and 5 clients, and in 12 months, just 1 year, has a run rate of $330,000 of revenue and 42 ongoing clients. We talked about his astronomical growth and how he's been able to keep up, how he generates leads, which are mostly coming from Google search now, how he leverages a one-time financial plan in his sales process, and how he is now closing 80% of the ideal prospects that walk through his door. This is an episode you do not want to miss a second of. Support for today's episode comes from Orion Advisor Services. Liberate yourself from the back office tedium, slowing your growth with Advisor's easy-to-use, easy-to-scale portfolio management technology platform. Supporting a range of performance reporting, fee billing, trading, compliance, and client experience needs, it's tech that works as hard for you as you do for your clients. Build a better business so you can build a better life with Orion Advisor. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/163. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Kyle. Hey, Kyle, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we recently did an episode with Ryan Freilich for the second time, It was about a 1 year check-in, about 18 months after he had launched his firm. And, there were some good comments about that. Got a lot of great feedback from having done the 1 year check-in. I think that was happening in the VIP group. And then you emailed me and said, hey, I'm 1 year in, so let's do an update. And so I'm excited to hear sort of where your business is at, because you've got some really cool stuff going on. So just give listeners a quick high-level overview of your firm, sort of where you're located, how many clients you have, when you started the firm, and then we'll go through the career path and dig into the details.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm located in St. Paul, Minnesota. Fee-only firm, registered in May of 2017. So just, had my 1 year anniversary late spring. I have about 42 ongoing client households now. Most of that is AUM based billing. There's about 7 clients who are on retainer, and my forward-looking revenue, well, depending on how many one-time plans I do, which we can get to, it's a decent part of my business. My run rate revenue for the next 12 months is about $315,000.
$315,000. So did you start your firm with a bunch of revenue, or is this mostly, growth over the last 12 months?
Yeah, good question. So I started with about 6 client households, and that was roughly $32,000 of revenue. So if you look at a lot of other XY Planning Network advisors who start at 0, I basically was kind of starting at year 1, if you look at it that way.
Yep. That's fair.
So I had some revenue, and then there was some pretty big clients that came on board right away as soon as I launched. And so I had a nice cushion to start that allowed me to really reinvest in the business and take some steps that other people might not have been able to take in order to really grow.
So 330,000 run rate, you don't have to get down to the granular, but sort of what's the breakdown between AUM, one-time planning fees, and sort of retainer planning fees? I guess just generally, how does that made up in terms of service model?
Most of it's AUM. About 15% of it is retainer, and probably 10 or so percent of it. I don't have the breakdown with one-time plan fees. I don't really keep track of that very well. It's a part of my sales process though, the one-time plans. So I see the one-time plans as being a part of new clients investigating me and whether they want to continue to work with me moving forward. So it's a smaller portion of the revenue, but it's definitely a part of the whole process.
Okay, I definitely want to dig into that. Dude, that is incredible. You should feel really good about that. I mean, that is just explosive growth. That's some of the highest that we've had on the podcast in terms of, like I said, we can say you started, 12 months ahead because you brought over some revenue, but in the grand scheme of things, like 30,000, it feels like a lot, but you've 10x that in 12 months. So I wouldn't say that was the end all be all of it. Obviously, you've done a lot of work since then. So congratulations on that.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm definitely not where I thought I would be. It's been beyond my wildest expectations. I thought I'd be eating ramen noodles for however long. Thought my wife would have to, pick up an extra shift. She's a nurse. I thought she'd have to pick up an extra shift at some point. And so it's really been beyond my own expectations too. And I'm lucky, but I've taken advantage of a lot of great opportunities too.
Yeah, thankfully ramen is delicious. So so let's just talk about sort of how you got to this point. Have you always been a financial advisor?
No, I actually started out, I had no interest in the financial industry when I was coming out of college. I played college golf and had a pretty good career doing that, enough where I felt like I could give my dream a go of playing the PGA Tour. And so my wife and I, we dated in college, got married pretty soon after college, and then just hit the road and tried to make it as a professional golfer. So she caddied for me, and I had to, backing up a little bit, I had to raise money basically to do that because it costs about $50,000 a year for most people who are coming out of college who want to play professional golf.
So you have to pay $50,000.
Yes. So either the way it works is either you're one of the best players coming out of college, and then you can get some corporate sponsorship money, or you have a rich family who can just foot the bill for you, and
right.
Your mom and dad are paying for you, or you essentially have to start an LLC, sell shares of that LLC to people, and they're basically, you're kind of like a racehorse. They're buying a share of your future profits essentially.
Oh, that is an interesting structure.
Yeah, most players have to do that, and that's what I did. And so I was really fortunate enough to get, I think it was 13 people together who each bought shares, and I had about 115 or 120,000 maybe to run with, and that lasted me about 4 years. And so we were on the road playing golf for 4 years or so out of college. So that was a fun ride. But along that way, some of my investors were people in the financial industry. They were commodities traders, and I just randomly met them, really. So it wasn't any previous connection. And it was really through my association with them, the relationship we built during that 4 years, where I started to get interested in the financial industry in the first place. So after 4 years, when the time was, ready for me to get a real job essentially and move on. I mean, playing professional golf was great, but it's kind of like being in the circus in some ways. You're different place every week, and we were looking to settle down. So basically I went to them and said, hey, I think I'm ready to move on. I lost all your money.
I was going to ask, any ROI here?
No, I basically lost all their money, which it's common. Like, I had really good people behind me who knew that this was not an investment where they're really going to strike gold. They really just wanted to help a young guy who was trying to achieve his dream. So I had enough money where I returned a little bit to investors, but I had enough money where I probably could have played another year. But we decided to move on, and that just started a process where one of my investors really, he gave me the Random Walk Down Wall Street book. He put me in touch with a couple of his friends in the industry where I could pick their brains. And he just told me, he said, I don't really know that side of the industry very well, but this is what it should look like. And he basically described the fee-only financial planning model. And so it was another 3 to 6 months or so of me interviewing at Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, and places like that, and just doing internet research before I really even found the fee-only space. And so I was actually getting ready to accept a job at Baird, which is located in Wisconsin. It's kind of like a wirehouse, but not quite as bad. So, but yeah, it was through that whole process that I found the fee-only space and never turned back.
So did the investor that gave you random walk down Wall Street, was he a commodities trader?
Yes, he was a commodities trader himself.
Some of them were. That is so ironic.
I know.
That's awesome. He's like, I'm making a ton of money over here, but don't do it this way.
That's exactly what he said. He said he managed all his own money too. So he had been managing his own money for 30 years essentially. So, but he said he would never do it with a client's money. And so essentially they were exploiting an inefficiency in the market that they thought would have closed, almost right away. But it wasn't until Dodd-Frank that inefficiency actually closed and they were unable to make money anymore.
Oh, wow. All right. So you were interviewing at Baird, and then how did you actually learn financial planning? Like, did you actually end up working at Baird, or did you see sort of the other side of the industry in another way?
No, I didn't end up going there. The thing about it was I didn't want to go in and start hitting up my friends and family for money, to become clients. But it seemed like that was the only way to get into the industry, was being willing to sell things. So you were basically doing financial planning later. And I didn't want to do that because I had no idea what I was doing. And so I felt really uncomfortable with that. Baird at least had a decent training program, and they didn't have as high hurdles you had to meet as opposed to Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley. So I thought it was the best option. But that was when I started emailing people. I found the FPA, started emailing people there, and I just got recommendations from people there. It kind of opened up this new network where I realized that I could go work for a firm and just learn and have no business development responsibilities and become a really great financial planner. And so that became, once I saw that as an option, that became my next step. It was, okay, I'm going to find the best firm that I can work for and really just learn as much as I can and not have any business development responsibilities. And that's what I wanted, and that's what I found.
That's fantastic. I mean, how did you and your wife decide where you wanted to live? Was it just where family was and going back home, or were you just fell in love with the St. Paul area?
Well, my wife's from St. Paul, and I'm originally from Massachusetts. And so we were looking both St. Paul and Massachusetts for the next step. So, we were getting ready to start having kids or trying to have kids. So we want to be near family. And it just so happened that St. Paul, Minneapolis is sort of a financial planning mecca. There's just a lot of good firms up here, and there wasn't so much in Boston. I mean, right as I was getting offers at firms up here, I was just getting initial interview requests for the ones that had open positions in Boston, and we always loved it here. So we were kind of agnostic as to which place we would want to move. It really was driven by where we got the jobs, essentially.
Well, I have to say, I mean, you would have been quite the catch for Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, just because, one, you can clearly hustle. You hustled to get funding for playing golf. You hustled in order to just learn about what financial planning is. And you had an amazing network of golf buddies, right, that would just love to buy disability insurance from you. And so do you feel like, and I guess longer term, do you feel like, one, that was the market that you would have been focused on? And has that been your market in terms of golf, or has it gone a different direction?
Well, you're exactly right. Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley, even though I was contacting them outside of their training programs, they kind of fast tracked me because they saw me as someone who, could obviously raise money and had a network, and I'm really kind of the ideal profile for what would succeed in their programs, even though that was absolutely not what I wanted to do. So I kind of played that card with them to get a foot in the door, because that's what I thought was my only option. So
Sure.
That has not been a part of my marketing strategy with my new firm. If anything, I've kind of downplayed the golf thing because there are so many financial advisors who don't do very good work for their clients and are at the golf course all day long and are great business developers and whatnot. And that's just not what I wanted to put off to people. So people who go to my website, you'll see something about golf on there, but I haven't reached out to really a whole lot of people in my personal network unless they've first reached out to me. So I have had people say that should become a niche of mine, and perhaps it will be at some point, but it hasn't been so far.
Yeah, isn't it hard when you feel like your focus and your passion has been sort of spoiled? I mean, I feel that way about the industry as a whole, that, thanks to a lot of bad actors that, when I say, hey, my name's Alan and I'm a financial advisor, people like freak out and don't talk to me.
Right.
But, you're even further down that rabbit hole, because I can see that. I mean, golf has been the place where you made deals happen. That was where business development happens. So Very cool. So you found a fee-only firm or a planning-centric firm, I guess, there in Minneapolis. So did you come in just paraplanner, associate advisor type role and start learning from the ground up?
Yeah, exactly. So I had two offers. One was from a couple $billion firm, a multifamily office, and really great firm. And another one was from a small, well, not too small. It was two young guys, essentially. They had purchased the business from a retiring advisor, and then they'd grown it since then. And they were just both really, really smart guys, very aligned investment wise. The investment philosophy became a driving factor when getting into the industry, because that's kind of, I read the investment books. I didn't really know too much about the financial planning side at that point. But essentially, I took the job for $40,000 with a smaller firm as opposed to $50,000 with the $1 billion RIA, mainly because I thought these are the guys that I really want to learn from. There's a lot of upside to working here. The $1 billion firm, it was 10 years before you're a lead advisor. And I just wanted to get in there and get my hands dirty and learn as much as I could, as fast as I could. I already felt behind a little bit because, here I was, 28 years old, completely shifting gears, and I felt behind, and I just wanted to go to a place that had the best opportunity where I could learn the fastest. And so I took the job there. And even though it was less money, but everybody just told me, who was kind of advising me, that don't worry about the money. Go to the place where you think you're going to learn the most and be working for the best people. And so that's what I did. But lo and behold, 9 months into working there, the two partners said, "Hey, Kyle, let's go grab a coffee." And we walked downstairs to get a coffee. And the whole time I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? I'm going to get, did they not think I'm working hard? Or I thought I was probably going to get fired, to be honest. But they sat me down and they told me that they were going to split up the partnership, that they no longer wanted to work together. And so that meant neither of them would have enough revenue to keep me on. And so I was essentially losing my job 9 months into working there, and just had a baby. So it was a huge shocker to me. But ultimately from there, one of the partners, Joe Pitzel, he was going to basically go from there to start an RIA with his brother's accounting firm. And I essentially nagged him to take me with him, even though he was only going to have about $180,000 of revenue. I told him I would work for $25,000 and that my wife would, pick up an extra shift and we would make it work. And so kind of crazy looking back on it. And they ended up getting me, back up to the salary that I was making relatively quickly. But I just saw it as a tremendous opportunity because Joe is just one of the best financial planners out there. And I thought, being able to be along his side, starting a new firm, being a part of it from the beginning was exactly what I wanted in the first place. And so I ended up going with him, basically as soon as they were registered, we started that firm.
That's awesome. So for anybody who doesn't know Joe Pitzel, Joe is a boss. There's more nuances in this, but there's sort of been these like 3 generational phases of firm owners. There's sort of the old school who are sort of approaching retirement now. They really started financial planning. There's this very small middle block. Joe Pitzel's in this, Jude Boudreau, like there's a group in there that really from Kitsis's era when he got into the industry that sort of went out and started their own firms with no resources. There was just nothing out there for them, and they just figured it out on their own. And now we're sort of in that third wave, I'll say, that XY Planning Network's a part of. But, to your point, Joe and that group, they helped create financial planning, but they really helped turn it into a profession and really helped create what I'll call comprehensive financial planning or real financial planning now. And, I think looking back, it's easy to say this, I guess, but, great choice following the best teacher where you can learn the most, whether it's how to start a firm or just how to do real financial planning, because that's going to pay dividends long term. If you use your early career days for that, because once you're, I guess even your age now with a couple kids and you're not going to go take a $25,000 job now, right? There's a very short time window where you're willing to do that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I cannot say enough good things about him. I mean, he's, like I said, as good of a financial planner as he is, he was even better boss, and I just saw that as an opportunity that I wouldn't have elsewhere to be able to continue to learn from him and just be in every client meeting, be a part of every single aspect of the business. I couldn't imagine having better experience, over those 3.5 or almost, 4 years or so that we were together.
And he's a great golfer, isn't he?
Yeah, he is really good. I mean, we're almost like the same person in a way. He's a good golfer. We got along extremely well. It was never really any conflict between the two of us. We were just, very similar.
So talk to me about being a part of a startup, of a new firm getting off the ground, but not as a founder, because you don't hear that a lot. Usually it's the founder, toils for a couple of years and then brings on folks. So one, was that useful experience? And two, just like, how was it, I guess, from your seat watching and helping this firm get off the ground?
It was amazing. Honestly, at the time, I had no idea what Joe was going through. I had no idea what it really felt like to be in his position, especially taking somebody like me along with him and being responsible for someone like me when the revenue wasn't there yet. So since I've had more of appreciation for that, but yeah, I mean, you're trying to figure it out all together, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was still less than a year into the business, and so I didn't really know what needed to get done, but Joe would just delegate things to me and tell me what to do, and I kind of was learning on the fly, learning how to, all of a sudden I was responsible for the paperwork, and we onboarded 80 new clients while I was there. So in 2.5 years. And so I essentially was in charge of that whole process so that Joe could be freed up to do a lot of the higher level stuff and business development activities. So, I mean, I really just learned how to do great financial planning during that time behind the scenes. I didn't really learn how to run a client meeting at that time, but I was watching, I watched Joe in every single one. And so I in hindsight, it was just a tremendous experience, but I wish I would have realized at the time just how unique it was and how much Joe had really done for me to give me that opportunity, and granted, like, he didn't know we were going to grow that quickly, but they did make a good decision early on bringing me on because they really needed me.
So at what point in this process did you get your CFP?
Well, I did the two-year apprenticeship because I was working so closely with Joe. So I think I actually got my marks in November or December of 2015, and I started in the industry in July of 2013. So I really was on the fast track, that whole time. Essentially, after starting Pitzel Financial, in my spare time, I was, studying for the CFP and trying to get ready for that exam. And it kind of coincided. When I took the exam, it kind of coincided with that 2-year mark.
So you had a little one, your wife works, you're working full time. How do you find the time to balance and prioritize, getting through the CFP education at that point?
It was awful. It was terrible.
Fair enough.
Yeah. My wife was working, she's been working part-time. So there was a little bit more flexibility there. And we had a lot of tough things happen too. Like our daughter had a really bad daycare experience, and so we kind of ham and egged it a while. But yeah, every day after work, essentially leading up to the exam, I was studying for 3 hours. I studied for 3 hours every day, and your family just kind of has to eat that. There's nothing else you can do about it, and they just have to make do with life without you. I mean, it was good enough I was able to be with my kids until bedtime, but then basically after bedtime, I was studying, and there was not really much chance to be with my wife, so that was a really hard season.
Fortunately, a short-term one, but still hard nonetheless. So I know there are a lot of folks out there that are concerned about it, and think like, I just don't have the time, and I get it, but the pass rate for folks that are going through like you did is much, much higher than folks that are coming out of college with a degree in financial planning, is my understanding. And I think that's why. I think because, the last thing you wanted to do was have to retake that test.
Exactly.
It's just so much energy and time. So,
and I was really motivated too, because I knew that it was the step that I had to take to be taken seriously as a financial planner, and to, be taken seriously by Joe, and like I needed to become a CFP. It was just the next step in my career, and it was the biggest one, and I just had to do it. So, and you don't want to go through that process all over again by failing, especially with young kids and whatnot. So I was pretty motivated to be one and done.
So what was your next step? Did you launch a firm after leaving Pitzel Financial, or did you take another hop to a different firm?
No, I started my firm from Pitzel. That was probably the hardest decision, or one of the hardest decisions of my life, to be honest. I worked really well with Joe. We went from about $18 million under management to over 100 in 2.5 years. And I probably had the best associate planner position in the country. It was just, I mean, basically Joe had said to me, the next 100 million, you're going to be the lead advisor on. And, we got from 18 to 100 million in 2.5 years. So it really wasn't going to be a huge amount of time that I would be lead advisor on a big client base. But I remember being at a bar celebrating our reaching 100 million with the whole office. And I just wasn't very excited. I basically had everything handed to me on a platter and I wasn't excited about it because it didn't feel like it was mine, Felt like Joe did most of the hard work, or, his brothers, the other partners, and they didn't really need me to bring in business because it was already taken care of. And once I became a CFP and once I actually felt really confident in my skills, then did I feel like I could kind of tap that business development pulse that I had. And so there was just something about, I don't know, it was a confusing time for me because I felt so grateful and loyal to Joe for everything he had done for me. But at the same time, I had this entrepreneurial itch. And two guys in my mastermind group, Ben Wasek and Daniel Hanush, who are both XY members, they had started their firms. And I just was really jealous in a lot of ways, a lot of what they had, being in control and kind of running their own show. So it was really difficult. I don't think I would have made that decision on my own for another few years, but there was an employment agreement that we both knew I needed to sign an employment agreement once I started being the lead advisor, and I just couldn't get myself to sign it, even though it was an extremely fair agreement. And I just felt like if I sign this, I'm really going to make things messy if I leave down the road to start my own firm. And if I have the inclination to start my own firm, I should just do it now, as opposed to making it really messy for both of us down the road. And so that was an extremely difficult time. It was, I think Joe was hurt by it. And it was just, it was hard. It's hard to disappoint people. And it was a big risk on my part too, because it's one of my friends who's also a financial planner said, I wouldn't take lightly the fact that you're in a position to essentially be the lead advisor on having, 100 million of investable assets kind of handed to you over the next 2 years. Don't take that lightly. And they're right. It was an incredible opportunity, but I just felt like starting my own firm was what was going to give me the most amount of happiness in the long term and more fit my skill set, as opposed to just kind of serving clients that were handed to me.
Man, I'm obviously as pro starting a firm as anybody, but if you had called me and told me the situation, I'd been like, what are you doing? I mean, it's so hard. We joke about it's like getting out of a warm bed. Like, it's so comfy. Why would you get out? You got out of a warm bed, like outside in the middle of winter. Mm-hmm. And so, which, it's a tough decision, but you had to make the right one for yourself. And I think that is a decision that there's probably a lot of folks want to make, but are really struggling. So, I mean, was there something that pushed you over the edge? Was it just like, you just realized it was time? Because that is such a huge leap of faith. It's not like you had 100 million you were taking with you like that. I get, that's a huge push.
Yeah, really what it came down to is just feeling unsatisfied. And, I played professional golf for 4 years. Like I have had a very competitive background where, in terms of as a golfer, I knew that I played my best when I had pressure on, when I had my back against the wall. If I just went out for a round with my buddies, I played terribly because there was nothing at stake. And so that's kind of my
They were like, you're a golfer?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I feel like at that time, I felt like there was no pressure on me, and I felt lazy because I didn't really feel very motivated. And what I just came to realize about myself is that I do my best when there's pressure on. And that's why I've always been a procrastinator all through my life, is because you couldn't get me to do something well unless I really, came down to the wire and I had to. And so the pressure that I've felt over the last year has been confirmation of that. I mean, like having that pressure on me, I've done really great work, and I've worked more, and I've been just so motivated to succeed in a way that I wasn't before because I didn't have to be.
Now, let me ask you the flip side of this question, because it's just incredible. How did your wife feel about you leaving probably a well-paying job with the keys to the kingdom, right? It's the golden ticket, the opportunity in front of you to take the risk to go start your own firm. I mean, was that a tough conversation, or I guess, how did that go?
Well, she has been incredibly supportive. I think she knew, because all through this time we would talk about it. And I think she knew that I ultimately needed to do this. I think she could see that, and in our conversations, and she was along the ride with me for the professional golf thing, and that's a much more risky venture than this was. And so I think she just always believed that I could do it. And like I said, we had, at the time, she was staying at home with our kids, and we knew that she could go back to work, and if we needed to get income. We knew that, we both have wonderful families. Obviously, you don't want to hit them up for support, but it's kind of like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that happens is that we have to borrow, $5 or $10,000 to pay our bills from family and pay them back later. So I don't know. It didn't feel like that much of a risk in some of those ways. I think she was really excited for me to have more control over my schedule and just be able to, at least that's the way I sold it to her, even though it's been kind of a hard first year. But we have had a lot of things happen over this past year that the flexibility has been really nice to be able to dedicate some time during work hours. And I think she knew that from the beginning that was going to be better than it was before, essentially. So she was really great.
Yeah, a supportive significant other is critical. It's not optional. If your significant other is not supportive, if your wife had not been supportive, one, I doubt you would have left to go start your own firm. And two, the last 12 months would have been completely miserable.
Exactly.
You need that support in your life. So, well, I apologize for harping so much on that, but it's such an awesome story of courage to be able to take the leap that you felt was right, despite the fact that financially, if you had sat down with a financial planner and said, what's the best thing for me long term? It would not have been to start a business, right? It really would have been just stay where you're at, make the money, be happy. But that's not what would have made you happy. So jumping into, you decided to launch a firm. Well, I guess the final piece of that, how did the conversation with Joe go in terms of, did you have the firm sort of ready to go and then have the conversation, or did you have some phase out time? And it sounded like you brought some clients over. So just talk to me about that initial sort of transition.
Yeah, I didn't have anything ready to go because, like I said, I was kind of wrestling with the employment agreement. I'll say it again. It was a very fair agreement. It was just, I just had such a hard time signing it. It wasn't like he put something crazy in front of me. And so ultimately, I kind of came to the decision that I needed to start my own firm, and went into his office and told him that. And I don't think he was expecting that. And it was really hard. There was a lot of tears shed on my part just because I felt so sad about it. I didn't want to have to do that, and I knew how much he invested in me and hoping that I would be there long term. And so I felt really guilty about that. But ultimately, it wasn't the kind of thing where I had to go clear out my desk and be escorted out. He knew that I had nothing ready. And so, frankly, they needed me to help transition as well, because we had just hired an admin. And so it was me, Joe, and an admin that were actually working in the business. And that was it. So I had to basically tie a lot of things up and make sure it all transitioned well. And so I think I was there maybe 3 or so weeks beyond my actual telling him. And it was a tough 3 weeks for the both of us, I think. But, we were very cordial about it. And the transition couldn't have been better. For my perspective, in terms of how he treated me and giving me everything I needed to transfer. He didn't give me a hard time about anything. There was questions over like some of the clients that were there, some family and friends and whatnot. But even them, like whether they were going to actually come with me or not. But he didn't, it wasn't like he was trying to keep those people who were basically their only connection to the firm was me. But yeah, the clients were a little bit apprehensive about this whole thing.
Yeah. So I guess how much time you said you had 3 weeks. So how long did it actually take you to get the firm launched then so that you could bring those clients over?
Well, I left, I think it was about a week after my last day there that I actually got registered. So there was a bit of a limbo period. And so, once I got registered, all these client accounts needed to transfer. I needed to get registered. And then it's like a whole domino effect of things that needed to happen, like getting on Schwab's platform, getting, all my systems and processes and things like that set up, even just the initial, the things that I don't know, I had no idea that needed to happen. But yeah, so that happened. I got registered May 2nd, probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, maybe or maybe a month later, Schwab approved me to be on their platform, and I was able to move client accounts and just kind of went from there.
So you've had tremendous growth. So 30,000 in revenue to 330,000 in revenue in 12 months. So talk to me about one, just where those clients are coming from. I guess you said you have around 40 households. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, I think it's 42.
42. So where did you find, you had 5 that came with you. You now have 42. That is 37 clients. So you have 42 ongoing clients?
Yes. Yeah. I had 6 that came with me. So I got really lucky. And like I said, one of the clients, one of my golf investors, the one who basically pointed me in the right direction, he's just a wonderful guy who has helped out a lot of younger people, does a lot of things to help out younger people trying to, whether it's get started in the financial industry or just, want to achieve their dream of being a professional golfer. He's just that type of guy. And so he was a client with Pitzel. He had a small, he has a lot of, high net worth, but he had a small amount of money with us. And so when we transferred, when I started my firm, he was also shutting down his firm at the same time. And so it coincided perfectly because I was able to provide a lot of value for him during that transition. And I had all the time in the world because I didn't have any clients. And so it was through that process that he really, I guess, experienced all that I had to deliver rather than just managing a small chunk of his assets. And so it was at that point that he started referring some people to me. So probably, I would say maybe a third of my revenue, or maybe a little bit more than, maybe closer to a half of my revenue is from him and his referrals. So basically someone who really believed in me and believed in what I did and saw the value in it started sending people my way. And so that was really the first stage, like the first 6 months or so was onboarding a lot of people who had higher net worths and very complicated situations. And the majority of my time was spent with those people, but it provided a great, base of revenue. I think my revenue run rate at the turn of the year was about 163,000 at 12/31. So that first year or the first 6 months or so was largely due to this individual and the referrals that he sent me of his friends and family.
It goes to show never, ever, ever be a jerk to people. Like always just be a good person, network with as many folks as you can, because you never know who's going to come back and help you. Like you had no idea when that guy helped you, get your golfing career started, that 8 years later, 9 years later, that suddenly he was going to be have such a major impact on your business. But it just goes to show that just be a good person to everyone that you meet, which you should be anyway, but you just never know how that's going to come back and help you. It's a small world. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've tried to listen. I mean, he's one of those individuals who people really take what he says seriously. He has a lot of credibility. And that's so I did. I took everything he said very seriously and I implemented a lot of what he told me to do. And so he saw me as someone who listened to him and respected what he had to say. And then all of a sudden, these people from across the country who've I've never met in person still, get in touch with me and we begin working together because his recommendation is so strong. So it is amazing. The power of a really highly regarded referral source is amazing. And you never know who that's going to end up being for your clients. And I got pretty lucky the fact that I have one of those, but a lot of like at Pitzel too, we had a couple of those people, and you never know who it's going to end up being, but there's some people who are very, very highly regarded, or their opinions are very highly regarded. And once they start telling people about you, then it just becomes a huge stream of leads. So it sounds like for 8 months, 6 months, you were just drowning in leads that were coming over from this gentleman and onboarding them. Was it around the turn of the year that you really started focusing on your own sort of lead gen activities and bringing in clients? Yeah. So it wasn't. So he sent me maybe 5 clients. So it's 5 fairly big, high revenue clients. But it was because of that, I had all of a sudden revenue coming in where I could start focusing on other ways to grow the business.
So that was one of the really unique things about my first, 7 months or so, was that I had revenue coming in through him, and, a couple other avenues, just, personal network outside of him. But it was through that I was able to really look into, okay, well, how do I all of a sudden become findable? We live in the 21st century. People, when I want to get someone to put up a fence in my yard, I go on Google and search for that. Or if I get a recommendation from a friend, first thing I'll do is go onto Google and search for that person and look at their, online profile. So I did a lot during that initial phase, which, as you know, doesn't have huge ROI in the short term. But I just did a lot of work my goal was to get on the first page of Google for Financial Planner St. Paul, or Fiduciary Financial Planner Twin Cities, or things like that. So I was able to put in a lot of time and effort into getting there. And right about the turn of the year is when that started to happen. I started seeing a lot more leads finding me through online search.
So I guess, how did you invest in that? I mean, even if you have, tons of money, like, where do you actually put the money and the time and energy in order to achieve that?
Well, I'd never really spent a ton of money on it, but the money that I did spend was huge ROI. And so I have my website hosted by 20 over 10, which I cannot recommend them high enough. I mean, they really made the whole process of creating my site and doing it the way that I wanted really easy. But they also have tons of resources. So there's a webinar called Win Local Search that I thought was really good. And they have an SEO starter package, which I think is $800, and a Google Analytics package, which was $200. So that's the only money I spent on it. But it's really just taking those principles, and which are, the principles that probably have the most ROI, and implementing them on my site and gearing blogging towards those type of things. And so I don't have a defined niche. So really what I was trying to do was win on a local level, and be, for those who are kind of in my region looking for what I'm doing, I wanted to be findable. And I feel like that can happen on a faster scale than niche marketing. Niche marketing has obviously high ROI, but it might take 2 years or so. Whereas I was able to get a lot of local search traffic in about 6 or 7 months by implementing a lot of what I learned from 20 over 10.
So that sort of started ramping up in January. So did you close the year? You said you started with 6 clients. You had 5 clients come over from that referring individual. So that's 11, and you had a couple come from your network. So have you just had a big boom then via Google search this year? I mean, how are these clients finding you at this point?
Yeah, it's mostly Google search or NAPFA. You can never quite tell where they're finding you. I mean, I have in my questionnaire, I ask, whether they found me through CFP board search, NAPFA, just general Google search. And, you get some idea from that. But at the turn of the year, I all of a sudden had, I think it was like eight people who were, in the middle of onboarding. I was kind of just sort of caught unprepared for onboarding that many people at that time. And yeah, most of it's through local search. So almost all the growth that I've had since then this year, so basically doubling in revenue since January 1st, has been through online search.
I'm trying to think if I've heard of anybody else that has had that much success, especially that quick, because I mean, even no matter what you do, Google search just takes time. And 2, like, Google it's get their leads, but I mean, it's not like it's only for, highly qualified prospects that are looking for a financial advisor, right? Like, you're going to get a lot of flow that way. So I guess, talk to me about how you close a Google prospect. So it feels like it's a colder prospect than, someone who's, we're getting referred over from someone that they trust. So how do you get them through the sales pipeline and actually get them to sign up for financial planning?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've had to refine my process. I've gotten really good at it, obviously, but when I started, the referrals were easy for me. I felt like I could really handle those prospective client conversations well. But the Google ones, or just the internet leads, where they are coming in colder, I was just burning them left and right. And I felt super frustrated, to the point where I had reached out to Nancy Blakey and got some coaching calls from her. And I did her course as well in October. And from that point on, my closing rate just went through the roof. I mean, it was like, I think during the course, I closed, I think it was 11 of 11 prospective clients just during that course. So it was a huge ROI for me.
I love Nancy's course, but that's insane. So what was it about the course and the education that allowed you to move the needle that far?
I just had no idea what I was actually doing in those prospective client meetings. I mean,
fair enough.
I'd only been in the industry for 4 years, so I wasn't really, I didn't have those soft skills. I was able to see, those prospective client meetings with Joe, but I think I didn't quite realize what he was doing in the meeting and the effectiveness of certain things that was happening. And so a lot of my prospective clients meetings early on were just kind of me talking at the client or showing them my software, things like that. But with Nancy, I realized, okay, this is not about me, it's about them. They're coming in with a problem, and I need to identify those problems, identify the opportunities that are there, their wants, their needs, and then it's all about them. And so everything that I need to talk about regarding my own process needs to connect back to those pain points that they brought in. And so having that framework, and there's obviously, you drill down further into that framework, but having that framework in place all of a sudden gave me something to work off in these client meetings, to the point where, and I find my sales process with her too in the individual coaching calls, where we figured out, okay, well, what happens? Someone reaches out to you, then what happens? And then you schedule a call, and then what happens? And then you schedule an in-person meeting, and then what happens? And what's the goal of each of these steps? So once I got really clear on that framework, things just started to happen. And a lot of it is honestly just focusing on the client and not on yourself, and bringing out their issues and connecting it to what you do, and then asking them what they want to do next, asking them, how does what we talked about fit into what you were looking for, and letting them, talk them into making a decision for themselves.
So can you talk me through your sales process? Because you mentioned earlier the one-time financial plans are now sort of part of that sales process. So without going we don't have to go super granular, but just sort of what are the phases of that sales process, and how does the one-time planning fit in?
Yeah, so the one-time plan is out of necessity, not out of want, because a lot of the prospective clients that I get through online search are looking for, they've never worked with an advisor before. So it's a huge decision for them to make, to just say, okay, let's move your account and you're going to pay me X amount per year, and it's going to be an ongoing relationship. I think it's pretty naive to think that you can close a client like that in one meeting, where they're just meeting you one time.
It's getting married on the first date, right?
Exactly. It's a huge thing to ask people to make a decision for. And so granted, a lot of them are coming to me, they're just looking for a plan, and they don't realize necessarily how much goes into financial planning. And so we start with a phone call. Once we have the phone call, if they seem like a good fit, we schedule an in-person meeting. And so we've had a couple touches before the in-person meeting through email and whatnot. They come into the in-person meeting, and we walk through how I might address some of the issues they're facing. And essentially, I say, well, we can get started. If you want to construct a one-time comprehensive plan, we can do that to get started. Depending on the situation, there's a flat fee. And so it's half of that fee is due up front. It's a 2-meeting process. At the end of that process, if they decide that they want me to implement that plan for them, then we would just talk about what that looks like, and the second half of that fee would be waived. But if they want to implement it on themselves, I'm going to give them, everything that they need to implement it on themselves, to make sure that they get off on the right foot and have a framework to kind of keep their own plan on track. And so that's the process that I use. I would say it's been more than 90% of the people that I do one-time plans for, that I want to keep working with, end up becoming an ongoing client. There's been very few that have not hired me to continue to work together on their plan.
So what is your fee range for that one-time plan?
It's on my site, so it's $1,500 for a single person, $2,500 for a married couple. If it's someone who's transitioning to retirement, it's $3,000, normal complexity. So there's some that have been a little bit more than that. I have one right now that's pretty complex that'll be $4,000. But then again, it's still, my point in those plans is not to maximize the amount that I charge, but it's to, one, deliver a ton of value for people who just want to take a plan and go run with it on their own. But two, to give people a clear sense of what it looks like to work with a financial planner of this caliber, someone who really takes that comprehensive approach and provides proactive, ongoing financial planning to free up their time and energy, and provide that second opinion. It just opens their eyes to what that would look like, to the point where they have a decision to make. It's, well, do we want to say goodbye to Kyle or do we want him to be a part of our life?
So when you're selling this, especially in that initial in-person meeting, you say, hey, we can do this one-time plan. Are you already talking about an ongoing relationship, or is that not even discussed? Are you just focused on the one-time initial plan, or are you focused on, hey, these are going to be the options down the road?
No, I let them know the options. I definitely let them know the options and say and I have the framework, but I adapt it to the sensitivity of the client. So if I have a client that comes into me and they're ready to go, like I've had one recently that I'm about to onboard where they knew that they wanted someone to manage their portfolio and be their planner. And so we skip that whole process. They don't pay that one-time fee. And so I have a sheet that essentially shows them the different service models. We have the retainer model for younger people who, don't have a portfolio yet or much accumulated. We have the one-time plan option, and we have the wealth management option, which is investment management and financial planning. And so they know it from the start that those are the different ways to work together. And I try to get their sensitivity of what they're looking for in that first in-person meeting to see, does this person really just want a one-time plan and completely averse to ongoing management, or is that something they're open to? And I just kind of curtail the process depending on what I find out.
So you go through the initial planning process, you deliver the plan, and then you say, hey, I'm here if you want help implementing. And you said over 90% close rate. I mean, so many advisors, even when we talk about things like content marketing, like blogging and podcasts, they say, well, I don't want to give away all my secrets. You're literally giving away everything, right? Like you're giving them the plan, recognizing that the true value of planning is not in the plan, it's in the implementation. It's in the behavioral side. So are you just like confusing the clients and overwhelming the clients into hiring you? Are they just seeing like, hey, this guy's legit and is smart, knows what he's doing? Like, what do you attribute that sign-up process? Because I would expect if I was a betting man that they would take the plan, they'd leave, they come back in 12 months and hire you, not on the spot. I mean, that I don't see all that often. Well,
there have been some who've done that, where they've wanted to implement it on their own and then have come back later and wanted to become an ongoing client. So that does happen. The sales process is much longer the way that I do it, but because it's longer, I think it is more effective and I have a higher close rate because of it. I'm definitely not trying to overwhelm the client. I tell them, I'm going to give you everything that you need to know. And if you want like the easy option versus the optimized option, I'll map out what the easy option is for you. Going to Betterment or going to Vanguard and just, having a one fund portfolio. But I show them what I would do and why I think it's better and more optimized. And so it's definitely, they're getting to see just how much there is that goes into this financial planning process if they really want to make all the best decisions and maximize every opportunity. But I'm definitely not trying to just overwhelm them to the point where they have to hire me because they feel like they're helpless without me. I am trying to empower them. But what I say to them is, and I got this from Scott Frank, who I know has been on the podcast before. He says, I can't go to your son's baseball game for you. I can't take your wife out to dinner or your husband out to dinner, But, if you want to be freed up and have the time to do those things and have the brain space to do all those things, then maybe it makes sense for me to implement this plan so you can not worry about it, And that's really the more powerful way to sell financial planning than just confusing people with your expertise.
I love it. I love that analogy. I can't take your kid to a baseball game. And it's so true, right? That, ultimately there are parts of this that we can outsource, but selling financial planning is such a challenge because you can't see it. You can't feel it until you've experienced it. And it sounds like your process is really working for helping clients actually experience financial planning and see, like you said, what all is involved. Because we say we do an insurance analysis, but that doesn't mean anything until you've seen it. You're like, oh, wow. Like, look at just the comprehensiveness of just the insurance section, which is just, 1/8 of the entire plan.
Yeah, exactly.
So you are growing like crazy. You came out to Bozeman to hang out for Accelerate, which was our event in March, where we talked a lot about hiring. That was really the theme of this event. And I guess, what did you walk away from that event and just sort of overall where you're at in your business? Because I feel like you have some hard decisions coming up around what you're going to do, because you're quickly approaching, if you have not already slammed into the decision of, do you hire or do you stay small?
Yeah, that has been something that's been really hard. I've been working with Arlene Moss, on the XY team to try to figure out that whole hiring process. It's hard because, I could just stop taking new clients, make a really good income and play a lot more golf and, kind of have a nice life. But I know myself and I know I would get pretty bored doing that, and I enjoy a challenge. And so I think I am going to, continue to grow. And that means hiring another advisor relatively soon. Been talking to a couple people, but I'm also going to put out a job description soon because, quite frankly, there's only a certain amount of spots that I have to fill up, or client slots that I can fill up. And they filled up a lot quicker than I ever would have imagined, but I need help. I need someone to support and then be a lead advisor relatively soon. And so the talk by JD Bruce at Accelerate was so good, just in seeing the different pain points that are going to happen down the road. And, whether you're at $1 million of revenue and 3 million or 5 million or 15, there's all these different pain points. And at any time you can stop growing. But, I feel like I at least need to keep growing. I'm not sure how far we're going to take this, but I really want another planner. I work best on a team anyway. I really like being a part of a team. It's been hard for me to mainly be by myself. I have a virtual paraplanner now, Dan Kellermeyer, but I'm looking forward to growing and expanding the team.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so you do have a virtual paraplanner, and so you think your first hire will be a financial planner, I assume, to do the planning work, or do you think they'll be doing some business development for themselves as well?
No, I don't want someone who's coming in to do business development, because it's the same thing as what, with me and Joe. Joe, the business development thing was taken care of. They didn't really need that skill set from me, and therefore I left. And that's kind of going to be the same thing for me. Like, I don't need somebody who can be a business or, who wants to bring in a ton of business. That would be great. But, I need someone who can serve the existing business and the existing clients coming in. So I don't want to hire someone who's like me, to be honest. I don't want another me who ends up going and starting their own firm in 3 years like I did. So yeah, but Dan Kellermeyer is my virtual paraplanner and virtual assistant. He just provides so much value, to be honest, that I feel like I can hire an advisor next rather than a full-time ops person. He just gets a ton done in such a little amount of time that I'm able to really leverage that on the operations side. And actually, my first full-time hire can be a revenue producing person rather than someone who's more operational or administrative.
Absolutely. I will warn you, now that you've said it on the podcast, you're going to get a few resumes to your email.
Good.
Because there are a lot of advisors out there that want to do the type of work that we do at XY, but they're either not ready or just don't want to be a business owner. Some folks just don't want to own a business, and I get that. There's no shame in that, but they want to work for someone who's doing awesome work, which you clearly are. And they just want to be a great financial planner, and we want to give them the opportunity to do that. So be prepared. I guess, how are you thinking about the future of the firm? Because I feel like, you've probably already started making some choices that are going to affect you long-term around if it was just going to be you and a part-time virtual paraplanner versus growing a big business. I guess, have you been making any decisions that you feel like are going to impact you long-term? And if so, how have you been thinking about those, just given where the business is at and where you want to go?
Well, from the start, I've really treated it like a business. Like, I wanted to grow an entity and not just my own practice. I didn't name it more financial for that reason, or I didn't really want my name to be a part of it. I have a really nice office space. Everything I've done is to try to look as legitimate as possible. I think that has had a good impact too on my growth, is actually looking like a successful business from an outside perspective, even though it's just me. And so I want to, if you go down the road, if you start and you charge too little and you treat it like a practice, then you have a very hard time actually making it into a business or a real firm, But conversely, if you have a high revenue per client ratio and you treat it like a business, you have a salary and you reinvest profits and things like that, and try to have a profit margin that you're actually trying to achieve, then you can be a business, but you can always stop being a business and become a practice. And so that's the way I've approached it. I've really tried to treat it like a business. And, there's a lot of things that go into that, but I've definitely tried to keep that option open of scaling up. And that's the direction I'm definitely going. And I don't know what would change that, but a lot of people, who start out charging way too little and have 40 clients and, $50,000 of revenue, it's really hard to actually, hire anybody if you're not charging enough.
No, it's very true. And I see both sides of that argument. And we definitely hear it of, just people are building different types of businesses. They live in different areas and that sort of thing. But you make a great point that ultimately you have more flexibility than most because you can go either direction and you have the revenue to support that. And, obviously some personal decisions for yourself if you're willing to give up the income to hire, counting on the growth and that sort of thing. But really, what is it that you're trying to build? Some people are just wonderful teams of one. Some people love teams of 5 and other people want to build an empire. And there's no right or wrong to that. But it's a good point that ultimately you've actually set yourself up to make that decision without having to, go back and raise, triple your client fees in order to do so.
Yeah, exactly.
So this hour has just blown by, man. You have such an awesome story and are just totally crushing it in terms of what you're building. So I guess as we're sort of wrapping things up, if you look back over the last year, really your career in general, but also just starting the firm over the last 12 months, what would you say are some of the key learning points that you would want to share with others that are approaching this decision of, do I want to start a firm, or maybe they've already decided and they're in that launch phase? What are maybe 2 or 3, things that you've learned over the last 12 months that you'd want to share with them that would help them succeed?
Well, it's hard to say in terms of whether someone should start a firm or not. It really depends on a lot of different things. And like I said, I just wouldn't have been happy regardless of how great of a situation I was in unless I started this business. I know a lot of people are kind of forced into it because they couldn't find a great firm to work for. But in terms of actually starting your firm, I would say really invest in yourself. I got that sales training fairly early on. That was a huge, huge, huge factor for my success so far. So investing in yourself, I almost didn't do it. It was like $2,500 or something like that. I was like, do I really need to spend that much money? But the net present value of one client relationship in our industry is just so high that it really warrants us to be investing in things that are going to grow or give us an opportunity to create opportunities and then take advantage of those opportunities when they come our way. So, you have to spend money to make money. So do your best to really figure out what it is you need to do to have the appearance of legitimacy so that people are going to hire you, and be able to communicate your value in a way that creates those opportunities for yourself.
That's awesome. Any other takeaways, or we want to keep it at 1?
Oh, well, let's keep it at 1. I think that's all I got. You drained me.
Okay. It's awesome. Like I said, I'm just so impressed with the work that you've done, but you make a great point that the decision to start a firm is very different, right? And we've been guilty of making it seem like, anybody can start a firm. But this is a hard thing to do, right? Starting a business, and even your story makes it sound easy, and it's not. Okay, there's such a challenge and a difficult road, and it doesn't get any easier. It gets different, right? You're no longer like, okay, well, am I going to eat ramen noodles, and does my wife have to pick up a shift? But that doesn't mean the decisions around hiring and scaling and operations are any easier than trying to go out and get those first few clients. It just changes, and some people love the thrill of that. I was waiting for that when you were telling me about, you're not wanting to sort of get complacent sitting at Joe's firm, how in the world you were going to stay a team of 1 unless you had something else in your back pocket you were going to be working on, because just some of us just can't stop moving, which is totally fine. So, well, Kyle, thank you so very much for taking the time to come on the show and share your story. I know this is going to be a popular episode, so I appreciate you coming on and talking us through it.
Thanks, Alan. Glad you had me on, and I'm happy to answer anybody else's questions if they want to reach out to me too.
Support for today's episode comes to you from Orion Advisor Services. Simplify the complexities of running an advisory business with the industry's most integrated portfolio management technology platform. Built to reflect your needs, customized to achieve your goals, and delivered with the support you need to be successful. Get back to the business of serving your clients with technology that works for you. Learn more at orionadvisor.com. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN Radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.